Hi, my name is Ken Nelson and I'm in charge of technical support at DesignTech International. Today I'm going to show you the fastest and easiest way to install an AutoCommand remote control car starter into your vehicle. To correctly install an AutoCommand, you will need to gather together some basic tools and equipment. These items should include a pair of wire cutters that can strip wires, a pair of pliers or wire crimpers, some electrical tape, a soldering iron, and some solder, an electric drill or screw gun with a 1/2-inch drill bit, assorted screwdrivers, and most importantly, you will need an electronic test meter or multimeter. If you do not own one, it is available at an electronic retailer such as Sears or Radio Shack for about $10 to $20. The next step is to correctly identify which series of AutoCommand you will be installing because each has its own characteristics that you will need to recognize. The 20 series unit is identifiable by its long, thin shape of the control module. There are 6 separate spade connectors on one side. The opposite side has a left option button, a red feedback LED, and a right code button. There is also a 10-pin Molex connector that houses the control harness. The 30 series unit is identifiable by the 2 separate LEDs and racing stripes on top of the module. On the front, it has 6 separate spade terminals, 1 or 2 Molex connectors, and a set of 8 dip switches on the right side of the unit. The 50 series unit is identifiable by the bank of 12 different diagnostic LEDs on top of the module. There are also 4 stripes on the top as well. On the front, you will find 6 separate spade terminals, 1 or 2 Molex connectors, and a set of 8 dip switches. Each box contains a keychain transmitter, an AutoCommand control module with antenna, a parts kit, an accessory wiring harness, a control wiring harness, and a power harness. Also is a step-by-step installation manual. If your unit is a 1-button 30 or 50 series unit, your box will not contain the accessory harness. This harness is used to power locks and the alarm features, as well as remote trunk release. The most important installation aid in this box contains the step-by-step installation manual and various guides. Read all of these guides thoroughly before beginning any step of the installation so that many would-be problems can be avoided by first reading the manuals and guides. The parts kit will contain a hood pin switch, an enable toggle switch, and may contain special connectors, wire ties, an under the hood warning label, a 30-amp fuse, antenna clips, an alcohol pad, and a pair of window warning stickers. Please take a few preliminary measures before touching any wires. First, open the vehicle's front windows all the way to prevent accidentally locking the keys in the vehicle. Next, open the hood where we will need to make several connections. Remember, keep any wires away from any parts that move or get hot. And if you smoke, do not smoke while working under the hood. Gasoline and battery fumes are flammable. Next, because most connections are made under the dashboard, this panel needs to come down. Don't forget that things under the dash also move. The steering column is exposed and is adjustable in some vehicles, so keep wires away from any moving parts. The brake and gas pedals move in all vehicles, so try to avoid running your wires in these areas. Now, let's actually start to install the AutoCommand. The first step is to install the warning label inside the engine compartment so that it can be seen by anyone working under the hood. The next step is to install the required wires through the firewall. The wires that need to go through the firewall are the pink 12-gauge power wire, the 18-gauge green tack wire, the 18-gauge yellow light wire, the 18-gauge blue horn siren wire, and the 18-gauge violet hood pin wire. To go through the firewall, find an accessible rubber grommet. You can see from under the hood and under the dash. Pull the grommet out, slit it on one side, and then run the wires through it from the inside of the vehicle to the outside of the vehicle and into the engine compartment. The next step is to connect the pink power wire to the positive post of the car's battery. The pink 12-gauge power wire must be connected to the vehicle's positive battery post. Failure to do so may result in undesired operation and may result in damage to your vehicle's wiring system. Remove the battery post and connect the short piece of pink 12-gauge wire with the ring terminal onto the vehicle's positive battery post, and then reconnect the battery wire. Take the long piece of pink 12-gauge wire with the metal connector and then connect it into the fuse holder. It will only fit one way. If it does not fit in the first time, flip it over, insert it, and then tug on it to make sure you have a secure fit. Next, install the 30-amp blade fuse into the fuse holder. Now, with wire ties, fasten the fuse holder and excess power wire to a location near the vehicle's battery. Now, cut off any excess wire tie as close to the cable tie and the wire as possible. The hood pin is a very important safety feature. It will prevent the AutoCommand from operating if the vehicle's hood is open. It is an absolutely critical component and must be installed. Many vehicles already have a hole cut out near the end of the hood that the hood pin switch will fit. But if yours doesn't, you will need to drill a 3/8-inch hole for this switch, which has a nut underneath and a wire that plugs in at the bottom. Clear away any paint and dirt from the area, then insert the switch and mount it with the nut and star washer provided. Now, crimp the connector that plugs onto the bottom of the switch onto the 18-gauge violet hood pin wire that you already have in place. Now, connect the connector to the bottom of the hood pin switch. Finally, connect the hood pin connector to the bottom of the hood pin switch. As a last step, check to ensure that the hood pin switch is adjusted so it is not making electrical contact when the hood is closed. Now you have a few options to consider for under the hood connections. If you hook up your headlights to the AutoCommand, it will tell you when your vehicle is running by remote control. Turn on your low beam headlights, set your meter to DC voltage, and locate the wire that registers 12 volts when the lights are on. Connect the 18-gauge yellow AutoCommand wire to the low beam headlight wire only. Note, if you are installing the 20 series unit, it will be necessary to connect the yellow wire to a relay that will supply 12 volts to the low beam wire. You can also have your horn honk once before the AutoCommand starts your vehicle. This will provide an audible signal that the AutoCommand has received the transmitted signal. Additionally, if you will be connecting your AutoCommand as an alarm, you will need to make this connection. Find the wire that registers 12 volts when the horn is activated. Once you have correctly identified the horn wire, connect it to the dark blue 18-gauge horn wire of the AutoCommand. The final wire you may opt to connect is the 18-gauge green tachometer wire. This wire checks to see if the vehicle's engine is running. On late model fuel-injected vehicles, hooking up this wire is optional, but is necessary for carbureted or vehicles that are hard starting. If you have opted for the no-tack mode, simply do not connect this wire and leave the AutoCommand module in the factory set no-tack mode. Store this wire because you may choose to hook this feature up at a later date, because some cars tend to become hard starting as the vehicle ages and gets mileage on it. If you have a carbureted vehicle or one that has difficulty starting, you will need to connect the tack wire of your vehicle. This is normally the negative side of your vehicle's coil. This will serve as the tack wire even if your vehicle does not have a tachometer. Setting your test meter on AC voltage and with your vehicle running, probe the wire and check for a reading on the AC scale between 2 to 6 volts that fluctuates as you rev the engine of your vehicle. Then, connect it to the AutoCommand 18-gauge green tack wire. Remember, there are 3 different AutoCommand series, so you may have a 50 series, 30 series, or 20 series module. Now, let's plug our wires underneath the dash into the AutoCommand. First, plug the black 14-gauge ground wire onto the spade terminal marked ground. Next, plug the green 14-gauge ignition 2 wire onto the spade terminal marked ignition 2. Then plug the 14-gauge ignition 1 blue wire onto the spade terminal marked ignition 1. Next, plug the 14-gauge yellow start wire onto the spade terminal marked start. Then plug the white 14-gauge accessory wire onto the spade terminal marked accessory. Finally, plug the 12-gauge pink power wire onto the terminal marked power. Next, plug the control harness on the 50 and 30 series modules here. And on the 20 series module, plug it here. On the 30 and 50 series units, if you have a 3-button unit, you'll need to plug the accessory harness here or here. The next step is to connect the ignition and starter wires. But first we need to locate the ignition harness located underneath the dash. It is usually one of 2 or more harnesses running down or near the steering column. It is almost impossible to miss because it contains a large number of thick gauge wires coming directly off the back of the ignition key cylinder. You must make these connections as close to the ignition as possible. They cannot be made anywhere else in the vehicle. Do not connect at the fuse box or under the hood at the starter motor. If you see any bright yellow harnesses, you must completely avoid them. This could result in accidental deployment of the airbag or damage to the airbag system. Once you've located the ignition harness, it may be necessary to slit open. Next, insert the ignition key and turn the ignition key backwards if the vehicle you're working on is American, or forward if the vehicle is foreign. With your test meter set to DC voltage, check for an ignition harness wire that only registers 12 volts when the key is in the accessory position and also 12 volts in the run position. When you have found the wire that registers the necessary voltage in these positions, you have found the accessory wire. Connect this to our white 14 gauge wire, which we also refer to as our accessory wire. Try to connect this and all ignition wires as close to the key switch as possible. We recommend you do this either by soldering, which will ensure the best connection, or with a special connector such as a 3M Scotch lock. Do not, under any circumstances, simply wrap these wires around each other and tape them with electrical tape. Next, find a wire that has 12 volts in the run position and in the start position as well. This wire is the ignition 1 wire, which powers up your vehicle's ignition coil and spark plugs as well. The next wire we need to find is the ignition 2 wire. This wire powers up the heating and air conditioning wires and is hot in the run position only. This wire is not hot in accessory, but is hot or registers 12 volts in the run position, but does not register 12 volts during cranking. When you are sure you have distinguished the ignition 1 wire from the ignition 2 wire in the vehicle's ignition harness, go ahead and connect the ignition 1 wire to the blue 14 gauge ignition 1 wire of the AutoCommand. Then connect the ignition 2 wire to the green 14 gauge ignition wire of the AutoCommand as well. The next wire we will be connecting is the starter wire. Insert the key and turn the key to the accessory position. The starter wire will register 0 volts in the accessory position (0 volts in the run position) but 12 volts during cranking, and then will drop to 0 volts when the key is released. Now remove the key. You will need to connect this wire to the yellow 14 gauge starter wire of the AutoCommand. It is important to note that this 14 gauge yellow start wire will actually go to 2 starter wires in Nissans. Nissans have a cold start solenoid that get power as well as the solenoid of the starter motor. The next connection will be our ground wire. Locate a spot underneath the dash that has the best chassis ground connection where there is shiny metal with no paint or undercoating and little or no rust. Do not use a metal location that is up underneath the dash that is attached to plastic. If none can be found, scrape away the paint and undercoating from the metal body of the vehicle. Behind the driver's kick panel is an excellent location. Use your crimpers and crimp the ring terminal provided onto the ground wire. Use a screw and tightly fasten the ground wire to the location chosen. When this is completed, this will be connected to the 14-gauge black ground wire of the AutoCommand. If you are installing a 50 series product, use the diagnostic lights to verify your ignition connections. Ensure that the diagnostics light in sequence with the ignition key as it's being turned. Now, let's connect the orange brake wire to the AutoCommand. When the AutoCommand is running the vehicle, this wire will act as an emergency shutoff to prevent the vehicle from being operated unless the key is in the ignition. Using your multimeter, probe a wire up underneath the dash at the brake switch that registers 12 volts when the brake is depressed. Connect this wire to the 18-gauge orange AutoCommand brake wire. If you are using a 50 series unit, confirm your connection with the brake diagnostic light on the control module. Next, let's connect the red-black 18-gauge control switch wire. Find a suitable location for the on-off switch underneath the dash. This location should be easily accessible to the driver, have enough clearance for the switch to be mounted, and be one where the connectors on the back of the switch will not interfere with any other control or be resting or pressing on metal. Next, drill a hole for the switch using a 1/2-inch drill bit. Next, mount the switch. In most cases, it is easier to mount the switch with the red-black wire and the wire going to ground already plugged in. Use the trim ring for the switch to secure the switch to its mounting location. Now, check the LED marked on/off on a 50 series unit and see that the light goes on and off with the switch. If all your wires are connected, double check to make sure your under the hood wiring is neat and tidy and does not interfere with the operation of any other vital functions. Now, if you're installing a 30 or 50 series unit, let's review the purpose of the 8 dip switches on the side of the module. Dip switch 1 is for teaching the unit the transmitter. Switch 2 is for teaching the tach rate. Switch 3 is for switching between the tach and the no tach mode. It is factory preset to the no tach mode, which means that the dip switch is in the up or off position. If the dip switch were placed in the down or on position, the unit would be set for tach mode. Switches 4, 5, 6, and 7 are used to program the 15 special options listed in the manual. Depending on your needs and your model, you may or may not need to program one of these options. We will cover these options in more detail later in the video. Switch 8 turns on and off the LED diagnostic lights. If you are installing the 50 series unit, let's confirm our connections with the unit powered up. Flip the enable switch to the on position. The LEDs marked power and on-off should be lit. Switch the on-off switch to the off and then back to the on position. The LED should go out and then come back on again. Release the vehicle's hood latch and make sure that the hood light illuminates when the hood is open. Next, press on the brake pedal and ensure that the brake LED illuminates when the brake is depressed. Now, put the key in the ignition, move to the accessory position. Make sure the accessory LED comes on. Turn the ignition switch to the run position. The accessory ignition 1, ignition 2 light should illuminate. Turn to the start position. The start light should illuminate and then go out. Turn the key off and pull the keys out. This will be all the wiring you will be able to confirm using the diagnostic lights on our 50 series models. The horn and the headlight LEDs are outputs only and will only light when the AutoCommand either honks the horns or turns on the lights. If the correct light does not come on or no light comes on when one should, review the earlier portions of this tape and check the installation manual to be certain that you have connected everything correctly. On all models of the AutoCommand, you will need to initialize the unit, which will verify whether your vehicle has an automatic transmission. To do this, simply press and hold the brake pedal. Turn the ignition key to the on position while continuing to hold the brake pedal. Put the transmission into drive, then back into park. Remove the keys and release the brake pedal. To confirm initialization, flip the toggle on and off and verify that the feedback light on your unit flashes once. The next step is to teach the AutoCommand the transmitter. On the 30 and 50 series units, you will need to flip dip switch 1 down onto the on position. On the 20 series units, you will need to press and hold the right code button until the red LED flashes once. Press and hold the middle button on the transmitter until the LED flickers. Or on the 30 series unit, until the green LED comes and stays on. Or on the 50 series unit, until the red feedback light illuminates. Release the transmitter, and on the 30 and 50 series units, flip dip switch number 1 back to the up or off position. Next, if there are any special options that need to be programmed, you will need to program them now. Each model unit has its own special optional settings available to that model. For the purposes of this video, we will not be able to explain each one. You will need to refer to the installation instructions to determine whether or not you will need to program any options, if at all. Now, let's try the unit out. From this point forward in the next section, we'll actually be operating the AutoCommand. First, flip the on-off switch off and then back on again. Remember, the enable switch may need to be flipped off and on each time the ignition switch is turned off. This is a safety feature that prevents the vehicle from being remotely started by unauthorized personnel. Although you may be concerned that you will not remember to use this switch after doing so several times, it will become second nature. You do have the option of deleting this enable feature. Then unwrap the antenna and suspend it over the rear view mirror. Now, press the middle button on the transmitter to start the car. The headlights will come back on to verify that the car is now running. Press the middle button on the transmitter again to shut the vehicle off. Now, walk 300 feet away and press the transmitter and start the vehicle again. Press the transmitter and shut off the vehicle. If you've hooked up the headlight feature, the headlights come on to acknowledge that the unit has received the signal from the transmitter, and then when they come on and stay on, acknowledging that the vehicle's engine is running. If you did not get adequate range, make sure the antenna is completely uncoiled and readjust the way it is suspended. When the AutoCommand is running the vehicle, stepping on the brake or opening the hood will stop the vehicle. After the AutoCommand has started the vehicle, the way to disengage it is to turn the ignition key to the run position and tap the brake. The vehicle will now only operate with the key, and if it is removed, will stop running. One of the nice features of the AutoCommand is the Quick Stop option. This option lets you leave the vehicle running without the key in the ignition. To activate, simply flip the on-off toggle switch off and then on twice before removing the keys. Then remove your keys, exit, and lock your doors. This option is great if you want to lock your doors but leave the engine running for 10 or 15 minutes while going into a store. While the vehicle is running, no one will be able to drive it unless they have the key and it has been inserted and turned to the run position. Another great feature is the vacation option. To activate, remove the keys from the ignition, flip the toggle switch off and on, then the brake twice immediately. The vacation option prevents you from coming back to a dead battery when you leave the vehicle for several days. The vacation option automatically starts your car if the vehicle battery voltage drops below 11 volts or should your vehicle's interior temperature drop to -18 degrees Fahrenheit or 0 degrees Celsius, or in the summer when it rises to 160 degrees Fahrenheit. How to activate these built-in options and other operations is described in the user's tips. Now, at last, it is finally time to mount the AutoCommand control module. First, choose a location for it underneath the dash and try fitting it there, keeping in mind it will also need to fit behind the panels you first removed at the start of the installation. Then, use wire ties to tie up any loose or untidy wires leading to the module, which could conceivably become tangled in moving objects underneath the dash, such as the steering column or the brake pedal. Place the AutoCommand under the dash in the location that you have chosen and, making sure the wire harnesses are not being pulled too tight and that the module is out of the way of moving objects, use a few more wire ties to anchor the module tightly enough that it will not shake or bump against anything while the vehicle is moving. Replace the panels you have removed when you began the installation. It is now time to mount the AutoCommand's coaxial antenna. Make sure that this wire is of a continuous length and run this up the A-pillar, which is the pillar between the front windshield and the driver's door. While running this wire, take care not to cut, crimp, bend, or kink this wire in any manner, as this will affect your range. Run the remaining wire along the top of the roof liner, terminating approximately 2 to 3 inches below the top of the windshield, and fasten right above the rear view mirror. You have now completed the installation process of the basic module. What follows is how to handle keyless entry, alarm and factory disarm, and the GM VAT security system. If you have purchased an AutoCommand model that has a 3-button remote, your unit is capable of locking and unlocking your doors as well as opening an electric trunk. Your vehicle must have electric locks in order to hook up this feature. If your vehicle meets this condition, the first thing to do is look up the wiring on the wiring guide and find which wires you will need to connect to in your vehicle for keyless entry. In general, you will find these lock wires in the driver's kick panel, and the trunk wire can easily be found behind the trunk release switch. For your specific lock system, the wiring guide tells you what type of locks your vehicle has in the column marked Type next to the Location column. Positive and reverse polarity are the most common on American vehicles, while negative is common to Japanese vehicles. The wiring guide will give you a brief explanation of each type and how each works. Also included is an explanation and a diagram showing exactly which wire to hook up. The guide also shows you how to connect vehicles which have lock systems differing from the three main types. Now you can lock and unlock your doors and your trunk via remote control. If your AutoCommand has keyless entry features, it also has the alarm capability. The alarm input wires are different from one series of units to the next, so refer to your installation manual for the exact information of color codes. If any of these wires receive a negative or ground signal after the doors have been locked with a transmitter, the vehicle's horn will begin to sound and the lights will flash alternately. The alarm input can also be connected to your vehicle's door pin switch, so the alarm is set off if the doors are opened. Your unit can also be connected to a shock or vibration sensor, so the alarm is set off if the glass is broken or the vehicle is otherwise tampered with. If you decide to, you can install a pin switch on your trunk so that the alarm is set off if the trunk is opened. Since the alarm input wires are negative, if your door has a switch marked negative, you can hook the alarm input directly to it. If your vehicle is a Ford and has a door switch that is marked on the wiring guide as positive, you will need to change the polarity on the door switch wire before connecting it to your unit. If you have a late model GM vehicle and your ignition key has a pellet resistor like this, you will then need to wire the AutoCommand so it can work with your vehicle's security system. To do this, you can purchase a VATS kit directly from DesignTech. The part number for the kit is 20041. The kit contains a relay and 3 of each type of resistance value that you will need to interface this with the GM VATS security system. These wires can be found encased in a white or orange plastic tube about 3/16 of an inch wide. If you find a yellow tube, do not touch it. These are the SRS and airbag wires, and if damaged or cut, will permanently alter the airbag system or the supplemental restraint system of the vehicle. You will need to measure the value of the resistor in your key. The resistor looks like a small pellet planted in the key, and we need to measure its resistance. To do so, fasten the key on its edge in a manner so that you can get at both sides of the embedded resistor. Do not hold the key with your hand, because that will cause you to get a false reading when you measure it. Set your test meter on resistance and touch one probe of the silver band on the resistor on one side of the key and the other probe to the silver band on the other side of the key. The measurement you get on the meter is the value of the resistor in the key. Measure several times to make sure that you get the same reading each time. When you have found the correct wires and the correct resistance of the key, refer to the section of the manual called Special Cases. This section explains in depth how to connect the relay and the resistor required to complete the VAT setup. Our technical service personnel will be happy to answer any and all questions you may have. Some models of AutoCommand have an output which is used for controlling an alarm system previously installed in your vehicle. The AutoCommand wiring guide has a column that will tell you if you have a factory alarm and whether it will need to be interfaced with the AutoCommand. Your specific manual will inform you on how to interface your AutoCommand with a factory disarm wire. Most factory disarm wires are found in the driver's kick panel and pulse a negative ground signal when the driver's door is unlocked with the key. Congratulations! We have now finished the instructional portion of this video. DesignTech would like to take this opportunity to thank you for purchasing the AutoCommand. If you would like to purchase any supplies, connectors, relays, or any of our other fine home, auto, and convenience products, please call us at 1-800-337-4468. That's 1-800-DESIGN-T. If you have any questions and you reach us during after hours, you may also reach us at our pager number at 1-703-218-7732. That's 1-703-218-7732. And that number is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Thank you.